Hello and welcome to part 8 of the project BFe MAX build. In this video we will be installing the Brand X Ascend dropper seat post here in the 200mm drop version, but before we get started there's a couple of little jobs to do. So the first job we need to do is install a handlebar. Like I've said on a previous video, I'm still waiting for the final bar and stem to come to stock for this build. So like I said, I've installed a Thompson stem as an intermediate stem, and this Atlas bar is about 8 or 9 years old. I don't really trust it, so I'm literally just installing this so I can trim the cables to the correct length and get the dropper installed correctly. So with the bar installed, the next job is to remove this temporary seat post. To protect the frame, I'm going to wrap this microfiber cloth around the frame so when we clamp it up it doesn't damage it. We're going to clamp the frame on the seat tube here, then remove the seat post. With the frame securely clamped, the next job I'm going to do is install the dropper lever on the bars. At this stage it doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be about thereabouts right to get a good gauge on where the cable needs to sit. So to figure this out, I'm just going to grab the bars there's a grip there, and position the lever in sort of striking range of my thumb in a comfortable position and just nip it up, and yeah, that feels about right to me. So before we can install the dropper cable, we need to install the dropper cable clamps. These sit on the down tube and are bolted in position on this bike. But at this stage I made a mistake. The clamps I've put on are for the gear cable and the brake cable and belong on the top tube, not the down tube, but this is something I corrected in a later video. At this stage I wanted to install this little bung on the cable, then install it into the frame, but it's a giant pain in the butt, and in fact I installed it at the very end of the build off camera because it was taking about 25 minutes to squeeze into the frame. It was the only hard bit of the entire install, so if you know a better way of installing these bungs into these little holes, let me know, because I got there by luck, I think. With the cable inserted into the seat tube, I then clamped the cable into position along the down tube, loosely, not incredibly tight, just enough to hold it in place. Next, I started to have a look at the trigger end of this outer cable and see how much I need to trim off roughly. So to do this, I just held it in roughly the right position against the trigger and rotated the bars left and right and sort of mocked up its routing on the frame. And at this point I worked out I could take a conservative trim of about 3 inches off the cable length, just to help tidy it up and get an idea of how long this needs to be. And before anybody forgets, it's important to save the ferrule end of the cable and get it reinstalled on the trimmed up cable length. After any sort of outer cable trim, I like to get a pick or a sharp pointy object just to make sure that the inner Teflon coating sort of tube of the outer cable is opened up and will accept the cable. With that all trimmed up and the ferrule installed, we can pop the cable into the dropper trigger and just have a double check of rotating the bars to see how it rotates around the head tube. For now I think that's a little over long, but I'd rather chop twice instead of cutting too short and having to redo it all over again. With the outer cable roughly chopped to length, I can now loosen the fittings along the down tube and poke the outer cable out of the seat tube so we can then install the inner cable. With this Brand X dropper we need to install this little barrel on the end of the cable that interacts with the seat post. I then threaded the inner cable into the outer cable, out of shot, and now we're ready to install the seat post. I didn't quite get the angle right here, but what you have to ensure is that the outer cable is connected to the seat post, and drop the assembly in and sort of guide the cable out of the hole without too much tension, so to make sure it's not crimped or buckled in the seat tube. At this stage I thought I'd attempt to try to fit this grommet again, but like the other time I failed. I think at the very end of the build I spent about 20 minutes trying to squeeze it into the frame, and eventually did by a fluke. I think it's a really tricky thing to fit, I found. With the seat post end sorted, we can pay attention to the lever, and because we've already paid attention to the outer cable length, it's just a simple case of threading the inner cable into the dropper lever and clamping it in position. Which I say is simple, it's a bit fiddly on this one, so you have to sort of loop the cable around and get it through this little barrel nut which is floating, which is not super easy. Then just nip it up with an Allen key. Post installed, we can now install a seat onto the seat post, so why not at this point in time? It's quite simple, just unbolt these 2 bolts, slip the rails in between the clamp points and bolt it up. The saddle I've gone for is the nuke-proof Horizon saddle. I would like a WTB, but I can't find any in stock anywhere, so I went for this to try something new. If you're interested in this saddle, I've done a detailed sort of first look at this, and I'll link it above right now. The last thing that needs to be done before this dropper install is finished is trim this cable up and pop a cable end onto it. Although this kit came with a cable end, it's always good to buy a good pile of them. You can buy about 100 for about £2 or £3, so get some of these in your toolkit. And it's always better than to be randomly jabbed by a cable whilst you're out riding, especially as this open end is next to your fingers. So with that all tidied up, let's give this dropper a go. Seems to work great, and the lever feel is fantastic. So that's about it for this video. Thanks for watching if you got this far. Be back very soon with part 9 of the Project BFe MAX build. Cheers.